Hello, I'm George. I am a youth leader and one of the volunteers at Icon Church. I'm also the HR manager at Trusted HR. And I'm with one of the directors of the company today, also a member of Icon Church. This is Richard Harris. We've been asked to give some insight into HR within churches and why it's important, and some hints and tips. So here goes. Hi, Richard.
Hi George, we're currently socially distanced, working from home. I'm in the office and the only one here, which is unusual for us as a company, but I'm guessing that a lot of churches and employers, this is how it is as well.
Yeah, yeah. The new normal, as people have been saying.
Exactly.
So, for those that don't know, what is HR and why is it important for churches now more than it's ever been?
The term HR stands for human resource, and it's quite dated, I think, but it's what's known um, across the whole business world as your staff, your people, your employees. It's mainly focused around employees, not volunteers, which is a separate thing for churches and charities and brings its own challenges as well, managing volunteers. But HR, what we think of when we say those things, is there's two main elements. One is around the employee life cycle and contracts and handbooks and policies, disciplinaries, and another one is around learning and development. There's another arm of HR around L&D, where people get developed, and you've got mentoring, coaching, and those things. We specialise in the former, so it's having contracts of employment, ensuring law compliance, policies for different areas of the company, church, charity, having a staff handbook. And I would say for us, 80% of our work is dealing with issues and challenges. Someone to ring for advice and say, this is happening, what do we do? Hopefully, the earlier the better. So if somebody says this person's not performing, or they're late all the time, or there's some issues in terms of their relationships with other staff members, or people are stealing, or they're drunk at work, many things come up in the life of what we do. Fortunately for me, George tends to deal with an awful lot of them. So when I'm on site with a client, George and the team, Melody, Katie, others pick up these issues and address them. But so when people think of HR, it's about employees, and we look at the employee life cycle. From when you think, I needed somebody to get a job here, we've got a vacancy, it's this amount of time, it's this amount of money we've got. We don't do recruitment, but we advise on good practice, right through to onboarding, getting contracts, handbooks, letters, through to disciplinaries, performance reviews, promotions, and when the time comes to the person to leave the company through a resignation or through a dismissal.
Great. So HR is obviously a really important area that we need to get right, within organisations, businesses, churches, any sector. What's some of the costs of getting HR wrong?
There's two areas of cost, I think, of getting it wrong in a church that's slightly different than a business. Now, where most of our clients are businesses, although we do have churches who we provide HR to. One cost is a financial one. So a lot of what we do is HR law related. So we keep up to date. It can take us a day, a week of the company to keep up to date with the latest law. There's an announcement as I'm recording this today. We've got an announcement from the government to say that the minimum wage is now going to go up by a lesser amount than thought, but these are coming out all the time, and how we apply those. We interpret the guidance for clients and tell them. We also advise on what you can and can't do in terms of law or what the risks are. In terms of cost, if you get it wrong and you don't have the right policy or the right wording in a contract, that an employee can take you to court. And we've seen many times where the relationship is very good at the start, but unfortunately can quickly deteriorate or something happens. Sometimes in the employee's life, sometimes it's not the right fit. And then it deteriorates quite quickly and they take the employer to court. Over the last 12 months, most small cases where it's not significant, the cost to the employer, be it charity or church, £10,000 upwards, because you've got legal costs in there. You have to have a solicitor in most cases, and that takes a lot of the money. Then you've got compensation if you lose, and sometimes it's technical difficulties or technical points that you can lose on. So everything's gone well, apart from you didn't give that amount of notice to invite to the hearing or something like that. It's just a small point, and then things can unravel quite quickly. That's one area. The other area is relationships, and one of the challenges, and one of the great things we do in ground level across the churches there, and I've been in other church networks where they've done similar things, and AOG do it, I know, is we have a lot of impact on our communities in terms of restoring people, and people that have got addictions and various other issues. And often one of a great way of getting somebody back into society and life from the journey they've been on is through a job, part-time job in a community cafe or a food bank, charity shop, something where they can get some work experience and build those skills. Unfortunately, if it goes wrong and things don't work out, we've talked about the money, the relationships there. They might have family in the church. They might be on a leadership team in the church. They might be supporting other people. So you've got two elements of this where you've got the financial side and or the legal bit, but you have a relational area as well. And you might be seeing that person next week in church on Sunday, or at the moment, you might see their comments pop up in live church on YouTube or something. So you've got to manage those relationships alongside the financial side. And that is one of the challenges and opportunities that we seek to support people on, really, because that's what we consider. We consider both of those things, the long-term relationship, who's the wider pool of people and team and relationships in the church that could be impacted by it.
Yeah. So obviously staying compliant to latest legislation, policies and procedures is going to be a key way of protecting against those big costs that could potentially come towards an organisation. So what do you do, what do we do really as an organisation that helps with that?
What we do is create a good foundation, because a lot of churches, in fact, I think probably most churches listening to this, for church owners, businesses, it's probably less relevant around safeguarding and church type policies. We'll have good policies. There'll be safeguarding policies. There'll be mental health for young people or adult training in the church, especially currently. There'll be a lot of support. There'll be some input from youth pastor experts. And I know in Icon Church, for our church, my daughter's involved in youth work. There's very strong safeguarding policies that are adhered to. Lots of practical steps as well to make sure they're applied, and who goes in whose car. If somebody wants to talk to you on a one-to-one, that has to be checked, and all those really good practices are in place there to protect people. Often it's not the case with the HR policies and practices, because it's a similar weight of policy, probably more, that need to be in place to protect the employer and the employee and have a transparent and respectful relationship, because that's what the policies do. If somebody's going to be off sick lots and you can't sustain that because you have to keep closing the cafe, then how do you manage that? So we provide the advice around that, but we also put in place strong policies that enable a caring approach, but also a supportive approach to the employer to make sure things are done properly. So that's what we offer. And we've just set up a YouTube channel, slightly behind the curve maybe, but we're sorting out people's issues. That's why, that's our reason. And the only video on there is our little video on what we do and how we sign people up, because we've got one of the first steps is to create a contract of employment template. We've got hundreds of different templates and options, and we support the employer, church, charity through this. And what do you want in your contract? We recommend you have this, this, and this, and this, and this is why. What do you think? And then we also create a staff handbook that's hosted online. So there's no, you print a version last week and then tomorrow it's out of date because the policy's changed. So it's all accessible 365, 7 days a week, by employees and employers alike on phones and whatever. So we host that, but we create that for the employer again, going through every detail to make sure it fits the culture. No two handbooks are alike, no two contracts are alike, no two offer letters are alike. So we create all of those. So that's the first bit. We set things up, no thinking needed. It turns into a very practical conversation around the implications of, if you do it this way, this is what happens, but if you do it this way, think about this. So that's what we do. It's very much of a hand-holding process. So Trusted HR YouTube channel will give you that sign-up process if you wanted to look into that more. But and you might have someone who's knows HR in your church, and that's often a good thing to do as well. Use who you have around just to check over the policies and contracts, etc. The challenge will be keeping up to date with the law, which is what we have to do. And one of the things we've invested in, much to George's dismay, I think, is we've invested in a relationship with a leading employment law barrister who's part of the Outer Chambers in London. Invested in means I pay lots of money, but what happens is that we get lots of excellent legal updates resource. In furlough, we get templates that are totally legally compliant. And we also have forums where we can get lots of excellent legal advice and ways of handling complex situations, because obviously we deal with people, a lot of the situations are complex, and from a HR perspective. And what we've purchased is a number of different resources, and one is a 10-hour training course on managing redundancy, which George and the team have been doing. And from what I hear, it's a 20-hour one, because he speaks so quickly to keep pressing pause to make the notes. But, so what we do as well is we provide that overview and insight to the current situation as we are, and that keeps changing. And to give that assurance of what you get from what we do helps. And I think it's that, for me, I keep coming back to it. Compliance is important, but as you know, in church, relationship, it's a relationship with that person, because the church associated businesses, either in the church in admin or some other functions in finance, often or youth work, and then the shop or the other associated businesses with the church, is keeping those good relationships that we do well in church often, and maintaining that approach. And HR sort of complements that, really. So what HR shouldn't be is something that is the big stick that's wielded out when there's a problem. It's part of the transparent working relationship between an employer and an employee. And we do excellence, don't we, in church? That's what we all aim for now. We aim for excellence. And what we do with our clients and with the churches we support, we try and provide that excellence from that side of things as well. And it depends on the size of the church, the company, the charity, to what level of intervention is needed. But it's really important to consider the mandatory compliance side, but also the relationship side.
Yeah. You touched just a little bit there on about furlough. And I guess one of the things that we've experienced as an organisation, as a business over this past few months has been that we've really been on the forefront of information gathering and information changes, legislation changes, a very quick turnaround and very quick notice. So from this time, I guess, over the past few months that we've been going through this pandemic, what's been some of the key lessons that you feel we've learned?
I think that one of them is around regular communication with staff, be they at work, at church, at home. It's just keeping that communication open. We've noticed a lot of employees in company that had never experienced challenges around mental health started to. And that can have an impact both on the manager and the employee, because the managers probably feel under stress as well. And it's having open conversations. We provide a lot of signpost information to some excellent websites. There's many out there. The Mind has been very useful, and they've updated theirs. Rethink.org is also an excellent site that we've used. And for teenagers and young people, Young Minds is an excellent resource as well. In fact, we've used it as a family, and we've donated money to that organisation as well to assist with these times. And so the communication and supportive conversations, clarity, because people still got to pay the bills and have they got a job after. And you can't tell them things that nobody knows, of course, but you will be able to give assurances at a certain level. So like the furlough scheme's extended, what does that mean for them? How much money will they get? When will it stop? Can they work while they're doing it? Can they go and work elsewhere while they're doing it? Lots of questions that you probably get, and it's having transparent, open answers to those. It's really helpful. The integrity of using the scheme is really important for testimony wise, because employees getting 80% of their full salary at home to stay at home in effect. I mean, the employer has some costs around that in terms of national insurance and pension, etc. But that is quite tempting then for the person to say, well, you know what, I'm going to volunteer for church and I'll come in, do exactly what they did when they was off on furlough, which means the government's paying 80% of the salary for them to be at work, which isn't right. So, and we've had to advise clients on this. It's always the client's choice. They choose what they want to do. We give options, risks, and opportunities and have that discussion. But overall, it's giving the advice at the time to make the most of what's available to support people within the spirit of what's trying to be done as well. With the integrity side, we try and make sure that we advise fully on that side of things to make sure everything's in place.
Great. One of the, I guess, the key HR issues that we encounter regularly is disciplinaries and exit of employees. Have you got some tips on how we can handle this well?
Yes, because some places you'll have one staff part-time or whatever, and you think, well, I don't need HR really, but I've got an issue there. So let me tell you what you do. So if you have a policy in place, and hopefully you do, you need to follow the policy. But as a general guideline, there's a few steps you have to think about and plan. And often we use a table to plan it out for people to help with this. So let me give you a number of steps that will help you. The first thing, so if we create a scenario then, and we've had lots of scenarios, we've had violence at work, we've had a client recently where they thought they tried to take the employer to court for working time directive breach, and their performance was low, so there's performance, and they were taken to the court, very messy. And we've had one recent example where an employee denied that they were alcoholic or drinking alcohol, and they smelt it on the breath at work. Happened to be a forklift driver, and when searched, because they had it in their policy, they could search, the person had alcohol in both their pockets at the time. So they didn't want to put others at risk, nor that employee at risk. So what do? So if we have a scenario of conduct, which that is, and we'll probably make it more everyday and simple, where somebody in there has shouted or swore at somebody in the workplace and stormed off and they didn't come back or something like this. So how do you deal with it? The first step is fact finding or investigation. So what you would do is think, what's happened? There were two people that saw that. I wouldn't use customers if it was a cafe, but the manager saw it, and one of the youth workers was over there, so they saw this, what happened. So first of all, you would talk to them, you create a list of questions around the scenario or what happened, and you ask them those questions. Already you need to be thinking of your cast. Who's involved in all this? Well, you've got the employee, you've got witnesses, and you need to have somebody who can do the investigation that's fairly independent. So another manager, somebody more senior, they will take that investigation, have a note taker with them, talk down to person A who heard it, person B, and then if needed, you bring the employee in and you say, person A said this, person B said this, can we talk through what happened? You tell me what happened. So you have the questions prepared. Again, we do that for our clients. We write the questions out and talk through what the options are. After that, then there's a decision needs to be made by the person who's done the investigation or a manager. Do we invite this person for an interview? Because it could be that actually when you actually interview people, it wasn't that person didn't shout, it was somebody shouted at them and somebody kicked them and slipped or whatever. So, but assuming it's straightforward and yes, they did do this, and they say, yeah, I did shout, I'm sorry about that. You might need to consider it's the 10th time we've done this, so we are going to have to take some more formal action. So what you would do is invite them to a hearing. The invite has to be, there's some legal wording in that has to be in there, and they have to be given 40 hours notice, and they have to have the right to be represented by a accredited union rep or a colleague. So we've had people bring mums, brothers, sisters, solicitors, all sorts of people into those meetings. There's no law saying you can't have mum, brother, sister, uncle, solicitor. So what we normally advise, if that happens to you, is to let the person come along. It won't do any harm. The person who's representing or attending with the employee doesn't have any rights to ask questions, but it's quite important that the person feels as comfortable as possible. Again, it's about integrity, respect, transparency. It's not going to hurt having someone there with them if they feel more comfortable with that. So that's something to consider if that happens. At that meeting, and this is where the CAS comes in again, so you need somebody separate who didn't lead the investigation in most cases, who will now hold the hearing. They will have a note taker with them that can be the same person from the investigation. It's good practice, so you're not trying to talk and take notes and you've got another person who's hearing things as well in case there's any discrepancy. You ask some tech questions, again, prepared in advance. And when you send the invite out to the employee, it has to contain the transcripts of what people have signed of that, the fact finding or the investigation. So they've got the list of questions. That forms the basis of the hearing. Have the hearing, take the notes. You don't make a decision on the day, or you don't need to. And then the employee leaves. And if they've been suspended, they go home. If they're still working, they go back to work. Then often this is when we get a call. This is what they said. This is what we said. What should we do? The choices are you can take no action for say, actually listening to all the evidence and what was said on this occasion, we're not taking action. And it doesn't mean that it's not applicable. You could, on occasion, under employment law, give a written warning, totally acceptable, but you may choose not to and say, we want to support you more on this. It could be a written warning, but we're not going to do that. And there's pros and cons, a lot of detail about why you would consider each option, but there's choices, that's the key point. The other option then is you go up, there's different levels, there's a verbal warning, a written, a final written or dismissal. Misconception, you don't need, it's not a step ladder. You don't need to have started with a verbal, then gone for a written. If a person's behaviour is to the level based on the policy and what the work role is, based on a level that you think it's not appropriate they're there anymore, you could dismiss them after that meeting. And that often happens as well. And there's another misconception that under 2 years, it's safe to dismiss someone for any reason. Whilst there's less protection for an employee from that side of things, from the 24 months employed, there are 37, I think it's 37 reasons why somebody could win at court. Because there's contractual issues, there's equality issues, there's a number of factors to consider there. You need to give the person right of appeal if you do dismiss, or on any sanction really, from a verbal warning up. And it's a similar process. The appeal has to be a more senior person to the one who made the decision, or an external, and then follow a similar process, hear the appeal, then make a decision, letter issued, and then take it from there. So hopefully, if you've got any questions around conduct or how you would deal with a process for an employee, and it is a lengthy one, unfortunately. There's a bit of law around it, which means that this is what the rights of the employee has. But again, it's conversations, transparency, and respect of it all we recommend. And George is nodding because this is his bread and butter. I would say every day that I've known him in this job, there's been at least one of these cases that's come through for him to either do a letter on or an appeal or advice. So it's what we do on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's great. Well, everybody's just had a quick crash course in how to do disciplinaries. That's great. Really great to speak to you today, Richard. We hope you found this conversation really helpful. If you need any more advice or you want to look into our organisation more, you can visit www.trustedhr.co.uk. And again, Richard, thanks for your time.
It's been good, enjoyed it, and hope everything goes well for you all and it's a good Christmas, whatever that means.
Yeah, great, thanks.